Welcome to another deep dive. When you grab a package off your front porch, like just a basic cardboard delivery box,
Yeah.
you probably just see a box.
Right, totally.
Yeah, maybe you look for the pull tab, you rip it open, grab whatever you ordered, and then you just toss the cardboard into the recycling.
Exactly.
It's a complete afterthought for most of us. But what if I told you that to a regulatory compliance team, that exact same piece of cardboard is basically a high-stakes legal document?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it completely shatters the illusion of packaging as just a simple container.
Right.
Suddenly, you realize you are holding a highly regulated instruction manual, and it's designed to fundamentally engineer consumer behavior.
Which is wild, because every tiny little icon printed on the back of that box carries the weight of national legislation.
Yeah, it really does.
So today, you and I are decrypting France's notoriously strict InfoTri packaging label system. A system where, honestly, getting a single picture wrong could cost a company thousands of euros.
It's no joke.
And we're pulling all of our insights today from a highly detailed, fact-checked compliance document. It was written specifically for packaging managers and regulatory teams. It covers the sweeping French environmental legislation known as the AGEC law, as well as this impending wave of European Union regulations known as the PPWR.
Which is a huge deal in that space right now.
So our mission for this deep dive is twofold. First, figure out exactly what needs to be on a French packaging label to avoid these massive fines. And second, explore a massive legal battle currently brewing between France and the European Union over these very rules.
Yeah, the legal drama is fascinating, and, understanding the philosophy behind the label is crucial here.
Right, because whether you're an e-commerce seller shipping orders to Paris or just someone fascinated by how governments try to micromanage the supply chain through graphic design, this is going to change how you look at the back of a cereal box forever.
Totally. Because France made this fundamental shift in how they communicate with consumers about trash. And without grasping that underlying logic, the specific formatting rules will just feel like arbitrary bureaucratic red tape.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the foundational elements.
Right, the basics.
Yeah, if you look at the source document, since January 1st, 2022, French household packaging requires two core visual elements. First, you have the Triman logo.
Yes, the famous Triman.
Right, that's the official French symbol showing a little stick figure surrounded by 3 recycling arrows. But the sources flag a major pitfall right out of the gate.
Oh, the version issue.
Yes. You have to use the updated version of this logo. There's an older, outdated version still floating around on Google Images. And if a designer accidentally uses it, the brand is on a fast track to non-compliance.
Which happens more often than you'd think. I mean, the Triman is essentially the alarm bell.
Right.
It signals to the consumer that the item in their hand is subject to specific sorting rules, but the stick figure alone isn't enough anymore.
Not at all.
And that brings us to the second required element, which is the InfoTri. That translates directly to sorting information.
And this is where the graphic design gets incredibly specific and incredibly strict.
Oh, incredibly strict.
The InfoTri section has to show each separable component of the packaging, point to the correct bin, and name the destination.
Right.
But the biggest rule, like the golden rule of InfoTri that completely changes the game, is how you are legally required to name those components.
Yes. What's fascinating here is that the French system names components strictly by their physical function, never by their chemical material.
Which is such a departure from how we usually think about recycling.
It really is.
I mean, if you have a plastic bottle, you do not print P or polyethylene on the sorting label.
No, definitely not.
You print the French word for bottle, bouteille. If it's a cap, you write BOUCHON. A box is an étui.
Right. A jar is a POT. A lid is a couvercle. You are explicitly forbidden from using those obscure material identification codes within the InfoTri section itself.
You mean like TAP 21 for cardboard?
Exactly. Or, the little numbers inside the chasing arrows.
Oh, bro.
Those material codes can exist somewhere else on the package for industrial sorting purposes, but not in the consumer-facing instructions. And the reason this matters is brilliant in its simplicity.
How so?
It completely removes the burden of chemical knowledge from the everyday consumer.
Okay, I love that. It's like giving someone driving directions by pointing out physical landmarks, right?
Yes, exactly.
Like saying, hey, turn left at the gas station and right at the big oak tree, rather than giving them raw GPS coordinates.
That is a perfect analogy.
It just makes intuitive sense. You see a bottle, the label says bouteille, you know exactly what it's referring to. You don't need a degree in materials science to throw out your trash.
Because think about the reality of standing in your kitchen holding an empty container. You shouldn't have to squint at a tiny number and wonder if you're holding a high-density polymer or a low-density polymer.
Right. Nobody has time for that.
Exactly. You just need to know it's a bottle. By focusing on the physical function of the object, the French government eliminated a massive point of friction, a friction that historically caused people to just give up and throw recyclables in the regular trash.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So, okay, you've perfectly labeled your bottle and your cap using this functional French vocabulary. But that text is completely useless if the consumer doesn't know what physical bin on the street to throw it in.
Right, the actual infrastructure.
Yeah, let's talk about the physical infrastructure, which our sources describe as a, quote, simplified bin system.
Well, it is relatively simple compared to historical standards. It operates mostly on a two-bin paradigm for recyclables.
Okay.
First, you have the bac de tri, which translates to the sorting bin. This is universally represented by the color yellow.
The yellow bin, got it.
And almost all recyclable packaging goes here. Plastics, metals, paper, cardboard, everything. France actually recently went through a massive nationwide infrastructure update called the Extension of Sorting Instructions.
What did that change?
It means all plastic packaging, so yogurt cups, film wrap, potato chip bags, it all now goes into this yellow sorting bin, not just rigid plastic bottles.
Oh, wow. Okay, then there's a separate bin just for glass, right?
Well, the back of verre, represented by green, and this is exclusively for glass containers.
Okay, just glass.
Right. Glass jars, glass bottles, nothing else. If it's glass, green bin. Everything else recyclable goes to the yellow bin.
That does sound pretty streamlined.
It is. And interestingly, you just label the destination bac de tri on the info-tri label.
Yeah.
You don't refer to specific colors in the text itself.
Oh, really? Why not?
Because some hyper-local municipalities might still use different colored bins. But the functional concept of the bac de tri is universal across the entire country.
Wait, I actually need to push back on this whole supposed simplicity thing.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because I'm looking at the reality of modern consumer goods, not a pristine regulatory spreadsheet. What if my product is a glass jar of honey, but it has a metal lid?
Yeah.
You can't just toss the whole thing in one bin. How does a supposedly simple label handle the reality of mixed materials?
That is the perfect example of where the info-tri system shows its hidden complexity. It does this through a process of deconstruction.
Okay, deconstruction.
Right. In the case of the honey jar, the label has to address a two-bin scenario simultaneously.
Oh, I see.
The artwork team has to draw two separate pictograms within the same info-tri block. You draw the jar, label it POT, and point an arrow to the back of verre, the green glass bin.
Gotcha.
Then right next to it, you draw the lid, label it CO verre, and point an arrow to the bac de tri, the yellow sorting bin.
Wow.
Two distinct physical components going to two distinct destinations, all clearly mapped out for the consumer to pull apart.
That is incredibly specific. And our sources give another great example of this multi-component chaos.
The cosmetics one.
Yeah. Imagine a cosmetics box. Inside the cardboard box is a plastic lotion tube, and on the tube is a hard plastic cap. I'm assuming that means 3 separate instructions.
Every separable component needs its own moment in the spotlight.
Wow, really?
Yes. The label must show the ÉTUI, which is the box, then the tubey, then the BOUCHON, the cap. All 3 of them get their own little picture.
That's a lot to fit on a tiny box.
It really is. In this specific cosmetic example, all 3 of them point to the bac de tri, the yellow bin. But the law requires them to be separated visually on the label so the consumer knows to physically separate them before throwing them away.
It really makes you appreciate how much intense formatting work goes into the back of, like, a shampoo box.
Seriously.
But I am curious about the actual graphic design files. The AGEC law dictates that companies have to do this, but the French government isn't sitting in Adobe Illustrator drawing little vector files of lotion tubes, right?
No. They leave that to an organization called CITEO.
CITEO, okay.
Yeah. CITEO, which actually recently merged with another group called ADELPH, is France's main producer responsibility organization, or PRO, for household packaging.
So they aren't the government themselves.
Right, they aren't the government. Instead, they act as the bridge between the sweeping legal mandate and the practical reality of printing a box. CITEO provides the official info-tri guidance, the downloadable pictogram libraries, the exact sizing rules in millimeters.
So they give you the actual tools.
Exactly. If a brand wants to actually comply with the AGEC law in practice, they must meticulously follow CITEO's technical guidelines.
Okay, so we've mapped out how every separable component gets its own spotlight on the label. But there's a massive legislative curveball hiding in the sourcing.
Oh boy, yes there is.
What happens when the law literally forces components to stay glued to each other?
You're talking about the infamous tethered cap rule.
Yes, this part blew my mind. On July 3, 2024, a rule from the EU Single-Use Plastics Directive kicked in.
Right.
It requires that caps on single-use beverage containers, so anything up to 3 liters, must be permanently tethered to the bottle. They call it a BOUCHON solidaire.
Yep.
I've actually noticed this on water bottles recently. You twist the cap off, but it stays attached by a little plastic hinge.
Right. Well, I mean, it acts as a pretty aggressive anti-littering measure.
How so?
Environmental data shows that loose caps are one of the most frequently littered plastic items on beaches and in parks. So by physically locking the cap onto the bottle, regulators ensure that if the bottle makes it into the recycling stream, the cap makes it too.
Okay, wait. I'm genuinely stuck here.
What's the holdup?
If I'm paying a designer to make my InfoTry label, and the EU is forcing my cap to be permanently hinged to the bottle, does my designer draw a separate cap on the label or not? It feels like the labeling law and the plastics law are just colliding.
This is a huge trap. It catches a lot of compliance teams off guard. But the current implementation guidance resolves the collision clearly. If a cap is permanently tethered to a beverage container, the cap follows the container.
Okay.
It is legally considered part of the bouteille. It should absolutely not appear as a separate, distinct component on the InfoTry label.
Oh, because it's no longer a separable component. You can't easily pull it apart without breaking the plastic, so you shouldn't instruct the consumer to try.
Right. But the regulatory maze has another layer.
Of course it does.
Consider a product that has a cap, but it's not a beverage container, like a bottle of laundry detergent or a bottle of body wash.
Oh, right. Those don't fall under the single-use plastics tethering rule because you aren't drinking out of them on the go.
Exactly.
The cap is fully removable.
And since the cap is removable, it remains a separable component. So it therefore gets its own BOUCHON icon on the label.
Makes sense.
However, CITEO still deeply wants that cap to end up in the recycling bin along with the bottle, rather than slipping through the sorting grates at the recycling facility.
Okay, so what do?
The label must include a very specific mandatory text instruction alongside the icons. It has to say, laissez le bouchon sur la bouteille.
Leave the cap on the bottle.
Exactly. Leave the cap on the bottle.
So let me synthesize this logic, because it's like a tightrope walk.
Let's hear it.
If the law forces the cap to stay attached via a plastic hinge, you do not draw the cap on the label at all.
Right.
But if the cap is removable, you do draw the cap on the label, but you are forced to print a sentence begging the consumer not to actually remove it.
Yep. It sounds totally contradictory on paper.
It really does.
Yet the ultimate goal in both scenarios is identical, getting the plastic bottle and the plastic cap into the yellow bin together. The tethered cap forces the outcome mechanically. The InfoTry label on the untethered cap forces the outcome educationally.
That is fascinating. Okay, now that we've spent all this time designing this highly specific, highly regulated, linguistically precise label, who actually has to care about this?
That's the big question.
Right. Like, who is legally terrified of getting this wrong? Because surely this is just a headache for French manufacturers.
Oh, no. The regulatory dragnet is much wider than most people realize. InfoTry applies broadly to household packaging placed on the French market.
So not just domestic companies.
Definitely not. The source document makes it very clear that the French Environmental Code does not care where your corporate headquarters are located.
Wow.
It applies to massive importers bringing products into France. It applies to Amazon FBA sellers who have stock sitting in fulfillment centers outside of Paris.
Oh, man, the Amazon sellers.
Yeah. It even includes direct-to-consumer e-commerce sellers shipping from completely outside of the country.
Seriously.
If you are a brand sitting in a warehouse in London and you mail a package directly to a consumer in Paris, and that packaging enters the French household waste stream,
It needs the label.
it requires a fully compliant InfoTry label. You're introducing waste into their municipal system, so you must instruct their citizens on how to sort it.
And the penalties for ignoring this are steep. The French Environmental Code dictates fines of up to 3,000 euros for a natural person and up to 15,000 euros for a legal entity, meaning a company.
Furthermore, those are per infringement fines within the AGEC framework.
Wait, per infringement?
Yes. If a brand has an entire product line, say 15 different variations of a skincare product, sitting on French retail shelves completely out of compliance, the financial liability multiplies incredibly fast.
Oh my gosh. But surely there is some sort of blanket exemption for a tiny foreign startup. Like if I'm selling artisan candles from my garage in the UK or small batch coffee from Berlin and I only ship to a few customers in Lyon,
Yeah.
I don't have to redesign my entire supply chain for a French label, do I?
There is zero general small business exemption.
You're kidding.
And there is zero non-French company exemption. If the packaging ends up in a French home, you comply.
That is brutal.
However, there are strict scope limitations that every single brand needs to check before they panic and commission thousands of dollars in new artwork.
Okay, good. So hope.
The biggest carve-out, and this is a massive relief for the beverage industry, is household glass beverage packaging.
Wait, glass beverage bottles are entirely exempt.
Yep. Household glass beverage packaging is expressly excluded from the Triman and infotry obligation under French law. If a company is selling a glass bottle of soda, a bottle of wine, or a glass bottle of sparkling water, they do not put the infotry on it.
That is a massive exception to the rule. Why just glass beverages?
Well, glass recycling in France is historically very well established and deeply ingrained in consumer habits.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, the green bins have been around for a long time, and the contamination rates are relatively low compared to mixed plastics. So the regulators decided not to mandate the label there.
Are there any other exceptions?
Additionally, very small packaging formats, like tiny cosmetic samples where you physically cannot fit the legally required millimeter sizing of the icons.
Right, there just isn't room.
Exactly. Those have adapted rules where the information might be provided digitally via a QR code or heavily streamlined. The practical advice from the source document is to never assume blanket applicability. A regulatory team must meticulously check their specific packaging type against the current scope before altering their production lines.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh yeah, the plot thickens.
We've spent this whole deep dive learning the precise rules of the French infotry system, the Triman, the function over material vocabulary, the tethered caps, the 15,000 euro fines. But this entire system, this incredibly detailed, meticulously enforced piece of national legislation, is currently on a massive collision course with the rest of Europe.
We are witnessing a classic high-stakes clash. It's ambitious national environmental policy versus the foundational principles of the European single market.
Right. Our sources note some major legal drama. After years of issuing formal warnings, the European Commission finally escalated the situation in the summer of 2025.
Yeah, that was huge news.
They officially referred France to the Court of Justice of the European Union, the CJEU. The EU is essentially dragging France to court, arguing that the Triman and infotry labels are illegal.
The core of the Commission's argument is rooted in the free movement of goods.
Okay, break that down for us.
Let's look at the supply chain reality. Imagine a factory in Bavaria manufacturing shampoo. Under normal circumstances, they print one cardboard box in multiple languages and ship it across all 27 EU member states.
Standard logistics.
Right. But because of Infotra, that factory has to halt its assembly line. They have to swap out the printing plates to print boxes with the specific French Infotray layout.
Oh, man.
They have to run that specific batch, track that inventory separately, store it in a different warehouse, and ensure their logistics software never accidentally ships the German box to a Carrefour in Lyon.
That is an absolute nightmare for supply chain efficiency. It costs millions of dollars in duplicate inventory and lost manufacturing time.
And that is exactly why the EU is suing. The Commission argues that these hyper-specific national labels force companies to create custom, physically distinct packaging just for the French market.
Which acts as an illegal barrier to trade.
Exactly. But this isn't just a philosophical courtroom debate. There is a massive piece of sweeping EU legislation coming down the tracks that is going to force a physical resolution.
You're talking about the PPWR, the
Yeah.
Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation.
Yes, the big one.
This legislation mandates a harmonized EU-wide packaging label, meaning one standard, legally recognized recycling label for all of Europe.
Right. And by the summer of 2026, the Commission will adopt the exact specifications for this new harmonized label. And then by August 12, 2028, that EU label becomes mandatory across all member states.
So what happens to France's beloved infotry system on August 12, 2028? Do they run side by side?
Not at all. According to Commission guidance published in the spring of 2026, national rules that mandate additional sorting instructions, which is the exact definition of infotry, will not be allowed alongside the new EU harmonized labels.
Wow.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this puts consumer brands in an incredibly tight spot today. It creates a massive compliance paradox.
Because the lawsuit from the EU didn't magically erase the French law.
Right. The referral to the CJEU in 2025 did not suspend the AGEC decree. France has not backed down or withdrawn the infotry requirement.
So you still have to do it.
If a brand is shipping a product to France tomorrow morning, they are legally required to have that Triman and those French functional names printed on their box, or they risk the €15,000 fine.
But those same brands know for a fact that by 2028, those exact same French symbols will likely make their packaging illegal under the new EU law.
Yes.
You have to spend the money to comply today while building your artwork architecture to be completely ripped out and swapped before 2028.
Which is an agonizing position for a packaging team. And this is exactly why our sources highlight the rise of specialized software tools like PPWR Copilot.
Oh, interesting. What do those do?
Brands are relying on automated generators to instantly build these highly specific France-ready infotry layouts right now.
Oh, I see.
They use software to handle the complex logic of tethered caps and multi-component deconstruction, so their human design teams don't have to spend hundreds of hours manually learning a national system that is ultimately temporary.
That's incredibly smart.
It gives them a legally compliant starting point for today without overinvesting manual labor in an infrastructure destined to be overhauled.
Well, we have covered incredible ground today. We started with the brilliant simplicity of function over material, calling a bottle a BOUTEILLE instead of a polymer code. We navigated the physical infrastructure of the yellow sorting bins and the green glass bins. We waded through the complexity of deconstructing a cosmetics box, tackled the curveball of tethered caps, and ended with a looming legal showdown between Paris and Brussels over the free movement of goods.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. The next time you order a product from Europe or sit down to review packaging for your own company, you will know exactly why those precise French words and that little stick figure are sitting in the back of the box. So what does this all mean?
Well, consider the sheer logistical footprint of the impending 2028 transition.
Okay.
If the new EU harmonized label takes over, every single piece of household packaging in the entire French market has to physically change its artwork to remove the infotry.
Every single one.
Think about the millions of perfectly good, fully printed, but suddenly legally obsolete packages sitting in warehouses on August 11th, 2028. It forces you to wonder, will the pursuit of a unified, greener Europe accidentally trigger a massive wave of immediate packaging waste, just to update a label meant to prevent waste?